Hey everyone, today I want to talk about taking really simple sounds that you can record and how to build them into more complex sounds or how to design more complex sounds from them. So the example that I'm going to be using is just a simple soda can, and it's going to be one sound recording, so just the recording of me cracking the can open. And then we're going to see what we can do to build weapon sounds from that. So sci-fi style weapon sounds. All right, so the first thing I did was take the recording of the can and then just kind of looked at it, analyzed the different transients that are contained in there, also some of the bubbling noise. So just kind of identifying different components of the sound that make up the whole can crack sound. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it real quick. All right. So there you can hear, the initial crack open. There's actually several different transients there. And then, of course, you have the fizz, the initial fizz coming out of it, and then the bubbling as the can's already been opened for a little bit. So I went ahead and I cut that up into a couple segments. So we got all right. So I've got 5 little grains there of that. And then I have the fizz. And then the bubbling. All right, get the idea. So the next step in creating these more advanced sounds is I'm going to take those samples that you just saw me edit down, and then I'm going to create different elements or kind of different textures from those to begin working with. So this is kind of a broad stroke approach. Honestly, it's a lot of fun because you're just kind of mangling the sounds and just kind of creating interesting tonality from them. So if I take a look here in my Pro Tools session, I already have the folder opened up, and I'm just going to audition through a few of them, and then I'm going to go in and show you a couple of specific examples. I ended up making a lot, so I can't show you them all and take a little bit too long. But here's the different categories or the different textures that I went on to process from those several sounds that I edited out of the one can sound. So first texture, I got some airy whoosh or pressure type sounds. So let me go through these. I'm gonna pick a couple random ones. All right, that's interesting. All right, so what I did was, and this is going to be the same for each bank of sounds, the air whoosh, there's 10 different types per bank, and for each type, I've created 4 variations. So each one of these buckets essentially is going to have a whole bunch of sounds in there. And it's all the same number for each. Explosive impacts, okay? So here, I've taken the can sounds and just kind of made them into things like this. So just various types of explosive or low frequency sounds, all right? So that is probably an important thing for me to mention. Part of my approach here is that when I'm creating these textures, I'm thinking about different frequency ranges. So I know when I go to combine these later, I'm going to want things that sit in different frequency ranges. So those explosion obviously are going to sit more towards the lower end. And then some of the other ones are kind of, mid-rangey, and then some stuff focusing on the highs. So I kind of tried to blend a little bit of all the different frequency ranges as I was creating, or, specifying which element should be for which frequency range. So the airy whooshes, obviously that's going to be more focused on the higher frequency range. These lo-fi glitches, it's kind of maybe more of a mixed bag. Let me go through and see what I got in here. So all kinds of glitchy sounds going on in there. And then what else? Okay, so my mechanical sounds. There's one in here I really like. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's number 2. I like those. All right, so you get the idea. These are kind of more mechanical, more atonal, or rhythmic type of sounds that I created. So it's different than the others. Now, okay, this one, all right, maybe a little bit of cheating here, but I have been playing around with Serum lately. So I loaded some samples into Serum, some of them being used in the little noise oscillator because you basically load it. It's basically a sampler in a certain sense. You can load samples in there to use as a noise track. So I did run some stuff through there, and also did load some of these into the wavetable synth and mess around. So kind of cheating, but at the end of the day, when it comes to sound design, there is no cheating. You just make cool sounding stuff. So here's what we got. Like that one. It's interesting. All right. So I made a lot of these over the course of probably 2 weeks. So I really took my time with it. To be completely honest, unfortunately spent a little bit more time on it than I really wanted to, but I just was having a lot of fun. And I was like, you know what? This is supposed to be just kind of like a simple, I was going to do like a quick, like 1-day video. I'm like, this is actually, I was getting a lot better results from it than maybe what I thought I was going to. And it really pushed me to do some interesting creative things. So let's take a look here. I got some tonal elements. My idea for these tonal elements, I actually renamed the folder Synthetic Life, but I wanted all these to be, more or less pretty tonal, maybe a little glitchy, but I wanted them to sound kind of alive, or kind of like some kind of synthetic cyborg of some type. So what do I got in here? That's interesting. This one's a pretty good example. So some of them are just kind of tonal. Other ones are definitely have more of like a life sounding vibe to them, or like an animal of some type, like this. Really, I'm going to tell you what my secret weapon was for these tonal ones, or what kind of got me inspired was I was using it's a product by Isotope. It's called Vocal Synth, and I found you can create some really, really interesting, UI sounds actually through that. Even though it's kind of like a vocoder, you'd be, hence the name Vocusynth. So there is my different layers. All right, so let's take a look at a couple examples here. So first one, I'm just going to show you an example of one of the explosions that I made that I thought was pretty cool. Okay, now in fairness, I think I did some various speed, some stretching to change the frequency of it a little bit. So that was what I started with as a baseline. But very clearly, it doesn't sound too much different than the can just cracking open from those edits I made earlier. This will be interesting because I haven't looked at some of these in a couple weeks, so I don't, kind of reanalyzing my thought process here as we're going through it. So let's take a look at what I did. Looks like I put on first a compressor, so bypass that, or rather unbypass it. Okay. And then I put this thing, of course, is always great when you're trying to get some low frequencies out of a sound that isn't really there. It's a sub filter, so you're basically adding some resonance there. Bypass that. Okay, that one's a little subtle. I think where it's going to get interesting is with the decapitator stuff. It's probably what's doing most of the work. In retrospect, I could probably turn these two off. All right, unfiltered audio, dense, so some distortion. Oh, that's where I really added the resonance there. So you can see my cutoff frequency set to about 400 hertz. I've got the resonance all the way up. That's already something pretty useful in terms of an explosion sound. And that's gonna, I'm sure it's gonna sound cool once we unmute Decapitator. Yeah, so this is right there. That's more or less the finalized sound. The only thing that's left is the transient designer. So this is always useful when you're doing gun sounds, especially when you're creating from, weird source material. It helps you to shape the attack a little bit better, so make it a little bit more, a little punchier. You see I'm being pretty aggressive here, so it's definitely doing what I want it to do. Plate reverb, I'm a pretty big fan of the Sound Toys stuff. It's kind of been my I go through phases with things, but it's lately been kind of my default or like my go-to. All right, so let's take a look at one of the tonal elements. So as I mentioned, I used vocal synth a lot for these tone elements. Let me bypass this first so I can talk about the editing. So part of the thing that I really was relying on making these textures was just being creative with even just the editing process of the initial source sound. So this is still the source sound here, but I kind of chopped it up and I did some kind of like granular editing. So just cut that sound up into really tiny pieces, and I did, made some stutter edits and just kind of mangled the sound up just with my editing tools in Pro Tools, just moving things around, made some interesting textures. That's pretty cool on its own without even doing any processing. Now add the vocal synth in there, and I probably just played around with this until I was happy with the sound. I'm not going to do a deep dive on vocal synth right now. There's a lot of modules, a lot of built-in effects. There's vocoders, different types of vocoders, and it's really an interesting tool for this. So I'm going to turn it on. So yeah, it's kind of, you're going to get those weird, almost organic, but not quite type of sounds out of using that module. Some of the other examples I used, I definitely have other inserts on there. This was just, I picked this just from listening to the samples as one of my favorite. So demo that. All right, so let's take a look at the pressure elements. So the pressure elements are just kind of like whooshy, airy type of sounds. So something to just fill out those high frequency ranges a little bit whenever I go in to create the other sounds. So I don't know what to say about this. It's whoosh sounds, all right? So all I started out with was the bubbling portion, and I just did some envelope shaping with it. I've got some plugins bypassed here, and I think it's causing it to go out the left side only. But you can hear it's just the bubbles. I've added some fades there, kind of trimmed them up a little bit. So let's see what we got. We got Triad, unfiltered audio plugin. I didn't do anything too advanced in here, but I'm going to tell you that if you've never seen this plugin, I know I've used it in some of my past videos. I'm not going to do a deep dive on it right now, but you could honestly just use this one plugin and do a lot of really interesting things. So let's shut up and turn it on, right? All right, so I'm doing like this glitch shifter effect, which is, I believe, some type of pitch shifting. It's just a glitchier way of doing it. To be honest, I don't know. I'd have to go back and read the manual on this one, but it sounded cool at the time. So that's a fair enough assessment. Filter Freak, let's throw that on. I think we all may know what this does. This is if you ever need to make a laser like instantly, this has the right toolkit for that. So basically all I'm doing is I've got a pair of bandpass filters set different locations. I might have started building this one off of a preset, but then there's also that I'm using the envelope follower. So a nice little wah sound. Helps kind of create some movement for that. And that will be it for the pressure elements. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and take you through. Now that we have all 6 of those layers, I'm going to show you what I do with them inside of Forge. So basically, to just kind of overview of the process, I'm going to take the 6 different textures or elements. I'm going to drop each one of those into its own layer or its own randomization bucket, if you want to call it that, inside of Forge. And then I'm going to be able to randomize them all, and I'm going to work with it much the same way you would with S layer, but I'm basically going to randomly create a series of more complex sounds and then manipulate those sounds even further. All right, so stick with me here. So I'm going to do these examples live. I don't have anything pre-recorded, so I'll see. Hopefully, I come up with something that's pretty reasonable, pretty cool for you guys. So here's okay. Now this is the thing that I'm going to do that is very unique and different. Okay. Well, first of all, let me figure out what the heck I got on here. Okay. So some of this stuff, there's some inserts on here from the last time I was experimenting. So I don't know what's on here exactly, but we're gonna rock with it. Okay. What you can see is I have a MIDI track here, which has got my MIDI controller connected to it. So I map my MIDI controller to Forge or Reactor, similar to what you would do in S layer. If anyone's already familiar with S layer, it's a very similar type of thing. But here's Forge. Okay. Now again, I do have some other content on Forge on my website. You can definitely learn more about it on the blog. But just to go over the basics, Forge will allow you to take sounds, and you can use single sounds by dragging them in here. You can take that sound and kind of randomly create new variations of it. Or much like what you would be familiar with in S layer, you can basically take a whole bunch of sounds, pull them into a sampler, and then randomly mash those samples together with different layers. So I have 6 different layers. Big difference here, if you have used S layer, I actually have 6 different samplers, whereas S layer has 1 sampler and it just pulls random samples from that. I can randomize 6 different containers separately, which actually has allowed me to, I've placed each bank of those sounds, so like the mechanical, the boom, or explosion sounds, so on, into their own layers. All right, so they're all going to randomize independently. So I think that's enough of an explanation for that, but it is very important for you to understand kind of what this is doing before I go any further. Now, very interesting, take a look here. I have 1 layer soloed. This is my, it's not labeled or anything, but if I open the sampler, you would see samples in there. Those are my boom or explosion samples. So that means that that's the only container that's going to randomize here. All right, and then I've set up 3 other tracks that are pretty much the same deal. Okay, so here this is, I believe, mechanical sounds. I don't remember, but that's soloed. So I've got 3 instances of Forge running, and I'm going to use 1 MIDI controller. My MIDI controller is pre-mapped to everything here, more or less. The only thing I'm really going to be manipulating is the randomize button right there, the trigger button right there, and then I'm going to manipulate this volume, or the pitch, or the varispeed pitch wheel is mapped to one of my controller modules as well. So I've got 3 different layers, and the reason why I've got that is I could very easily just set up 1 module of this and have all the 6 layers and kind of be randomizing them together. But setting them up in 3 different tracks is going to allow me to actually print those different layers separately. So not only will I have a new, unique, complete sound, I will have all the layers printed as they occurred right underneath of it. So that means that I could take those 3 layers, and then it's perfect to throw into a game engine or something. You have a really large amount of flexibility to create randomized sounds in an engine, or it's just going to give you a whole host of sounds to choose from at that point. So let's go ahead and let's play. All right. I really don't know what's going to come out of here, but I'm just going to give it a shot. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Randomize that. So I'm just going to keep randomizing until I get something that I want to start with. And oh, I forgot to mention, if you look at my aux tracks here, you can see I actually have some inserts after reactor. And the reason I did this is I basically set it so that each band or each track is kind of in a little bit of a different frequency range. So I'm controlling those with an EQ, and that's all getting printed to track. And then I also have some send effects where I send effect aux set up, but I'm actually not using it. I don't have anything on there right now. Or no, I do. I have Filter Freak on there. So never mind. All right, so I'm just not printing Filter Freak. It's probably not active. Probably not, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so let me get back to this. I'm going to randomize until I find something that sounds cool. That's actually pretty cool. I'm just gonna go ahead and rock with that. So now what I might do is when I find something cool, and here you can see all my layers, printing them all down. So what I like to do is make a couple variations of it. Time I'm hitting that, there's some variations in the sound, and that's because Forge is also able to it's able to create variations on pitch. It's able to create variations on timbre, timing, and then also impact, which would also be kind of like a transient designer. So I'm able to randomize all those properties of these sounds. So each time I trigger that. And I've got the settings fairly modest because I don't want these to be too obviously different for this, this type of project. But you can get really crazy with Forge. Maybe I'll do that just at the end and see what comes out. All right, let's play around with this some more. So maybe those will be my just like kind of regular gunshot type sounds. Maybe I'll go a little higher pitch. Maybe I'll do, I'll do some slowdowns. That one's pretty good. So you do have to play around a little bit. That'd probably be, I'd like to create variations of power up and power down sounds. Oftentimes when I'm doing weapon design, even if I don't use them later, it's just kind of nice to have those elements that you can pull from if you need to. So, but then do some power up sounds as well. And then, some crazier stuff. Some more pitch, high to low. All right. So that's some pretty cool stuff. Now, if you really want to take this to the next level, you can use the Audiosuite plugin. It's called Envy. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with this. Now, to be clear, you could do this exact same process manually. You could go through and adjust the envelope of your sounds to, tie them closer together. But this will save you a lot of time if you're having to do a whole bunch of them. You wouldn't want to spend all that time just reining in the amplitude envelope. So that's all I'm going to do is just use the amplitude envelope portion of Envy, and I'll analyze one of these components. I've pre-tested them, so I know the laser is going to work out the best. So I'll analyze that laser, and just to be clear, here's what we sound like right now. That's pretty cool. The mech layer doesn't quite mesh with the other two, so this will definitely help that one out a lot. So analyze, and then I've got the mix level set to 70, so it's not 100%, so they won't be locked in too closely. Hit render, and see how that sounds. So that versus that. All right. You can even try the explosion there. So there, just by even playing with that inside of Envy, you can get a couple different flavors. Just for fun, let's go ahead and reopen up Forge. And I have a mode in here. It's called background randomize. So I'm just gonna take everything off the rails, and it's just going to background randomize is basically it's a secondary randomization process other than what you have your parameters set to. So it's like another randomization engine in the background you could flip to really come up with really crazy stuff. And then when you want to ease off, you can flip back to the set of parameters that you have. So let's turn that on. I'll do it for all of them. Yeah, sure, why not? All right, this will be interesting. Oh, you know what? Let me still have these soloed. I could be going way further off the rails right now than I am. Let's do that. And so far, everything's been done with those same couple samples. That's pretty interesting. All right. I think that's enough for that. Don't want to get this going too long. I think I can put I think I can put a link to some of these samples. I don't know if I'll have time to meta tag them. I'm going to go ahead and say I probably won't have time to meta tag them. Okay. But I got to tell you, some of these sounds I think are pretty cool and they could be pretty useful in a lot of projects. So, I ended up putting a lot more time into it and maybe it will be useful, So, thanks for watching and check out the links to the material if you're interested.